talk about texture. Texture is the way that the surface feels or looks like it feels. If we have actual texture, there are mediums that you can buy, like this medium I bought in Germany, and it has sand in it. I can put that on the surface and it will be actual texture. So if I touch it, it actually feels bumpy. You could also use a feather. That would feel soft. You could put glue on the page and put sand on there. There's a lot of ways that you can add actual texture to your artwork. Another thing that I have that shows the difference between actual texture and implied texture is I have a pineapple stamp. One of these I just stamped, so even though it has this pattern which looks like it gives it texture, it doesn't. If I slide my hand across it, it's just implied texture. But this pineapple, I used embossing ink, and I know it's probably kind of hard to tell, but if I run my finger across it, it actually has a raised surface. So, actual texture is pretty self-explanatory. Actual texture is pretty self-explanatory when you can feel it. Implied texture is when it's drawn on or stamped on, but the surface is still the same. It's still smooth. So we can create texture by using lines. We can stamp it. There's so many different ways that you can make it look like your surface has texture. Now, we can also describe all of these texture words. So if we wanted something to look smooth, I might just leave that plain because the paper is already smooth. Or fuzzy, like a teddy bear. Slimy, maybe I would use the color green because that's what it reminds me of. It's slimy, it's green and slimy. Prickly, I think of a cactus. Rough, I want to add some sand there. Oh, sandy, I didn't know I had sandy on there. Now I really want to add sand there. I want to switch it to that one. Maybe rough and sandy can be used for the same thing. Or I'll have to go back to rough and see what else I can add to that. This surface is pretty fun. This stuff's pretty fun to work with too because you can paint over the top of it. And fluffy, kind of want to glue the feather on there. And waxy, I might put some wax paper there. So go around your house and try to find these kinds of surfaces, things that describe it, and either draw them or cut a little piece and glue them onto your paper. So you can decide whether you want it to have actual texture or implied texture. Now, another one of my favorite things about texture is that you get to be creative and look around your house and find things that you can use to make marks. So one thing that I found in the recycling is this little tray that was holding some paint, and I'm going to use the back side of it, put some paint on, and then stamp on there, and that will give us some texture. So let me grab some paint. So I'm just gonna use my paintbrush and do this, but I could use a roll, I could roll it on too to get a nice even coat. Rolling it on's a little faster if you have a brayer, but I don't know. That's a pretty light blue, so I don't know if I can show it, but all right. It did, it showed up. Hopefully you can see it okay. Another thing that you can find around the house is a toothpick or Q-tips, and they make excellent tools for scratching into paint. So I might do a thick layer of paint and go back in through it with a toothpick or a kebab stick. This is a kebab stick. I can use my paper towel to create texture. I could use a sponge or crumpled newspaper. The possibilities are endless, and I think that the reason that I love texture so much is it really does help you think outside the box. You're just constantly thinking, what could I do with all of this stuff? Another thing that you can do, so I actually have specific tools that were created to put lines in, but you could use tiling tools that when you're adding the glue to the back of the tile, it has a cool texture effect to it. You can also make your own. You could take the lid of plastic containers and then you can cut them up with scissors along the edge and then drag it through things, or you can even use hair combs, as long as they're not your mother's, and you might have to have a dedicated hair combs because you're probably not going to want to use it in your hair after that. So I have another piece of paper that shows some drawn textures rather than actual texture. These are implied textures. So you could look at that paper and add some of those things to your implied texture box. Or you can go around, you can look in newspaper or magazines and you can find textures and try to recreate them with your pen, or go on a nature walk and try to see the different textures outside and then try to replicate them by drawing them in. Truly, there is unlimited possibilities here. Even drawing dots, but closer together and smaller dots. There's so many things you can do. Another thing that you can do is we made this, I made this yesterday and let it dry overnight, and now I'm going to use it as a texture plate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a piece of paper over the top of it, and then I'm going to run a crayon or a wax pastel over the top to create these bumps. So you can see I have done this with some different texture plates and things. I found a leaf outside and I did it with a couple different leaves. Some of the leaves turned out differently than others. I did this one across a heater vent. This one was also across a something metal in my house. I can't remember what it was. And this was along a piece of brick. So you can also take actual texture and then put a paper on it and rub a crayon over it and get texture off of it. Or you can use glue and create your own texture plate. And let's test this out. So I'm gonna do half of this with crayon and half with wax. It works better if you peel the crayon and you break it in half so that you can use the side. So my crayons are kind of new and it's hard for me to want to break them when they're new. So it might not work as well this way. I'm gonna do it for the sake of art. Now I'm going to use one of these oil pastels. Another way, one of my favorite ways to add texture is using stencils. And you can create your own stencils too. Now I'm going to paint over the top of this one and have actual texture. And this one, it does have some texture because the wax, the crayon has texture. The oil pastel has even more texture. I feel that a lot more than even the crayon. The crayon's a lot more smooth. And so even depending on the medium that you use will change the texture. So I might keep a glue layer and then go over the top of it with paint. And this, of course, we can add some watercolor to make that pop out more. I need a bigger paintbrush. We are going to create an abstract work of art today, and we are going to try and use as many different techniques as we can think of. The only problem with this paper here is I have found personally that it is a little bit harder to get a good texture rubbing on thick paper. It generally works better with less thick paper. I can do a rubbing though, and I could do it on a thinner piece of paper like tissue paper and then glue it over the top, and that would add an excellent layer of texture on that. All right, so a few tools that I really love to use that you may have around your house. This is a Play-Doh roller, so it's a kid's toy. This is the tile scraper for tiling glue, but you could also take a card key from, this is from a play place that we go to that you load money on, but you could use one from a hotel card key, and you could cut your own little grooves out of it, or like I said, you can use a comb. But I love to spread paint on with these, because it goes on so thick that you can come back through and you can use the end of your paintbrush, or you can use your skewers, and you can create some scratch marks in the paint, which is called sgraffito, which is an Italian word to scratch. So we are going to start adding a layer of paint on our paper, and we're just going to keep on adding layers and layers and layers, and then scratching through those layers to bring the bottom layers up. And hopefully you just have a really fun time with this and get really creative. Some of the things that I would say would help you to do a better picture is to pick just a few colors. I kept the same 6 colors, and then I added white to change the value or mix them together. So that's going to help to not overwhelm the piece and to make it have to be unified. Another thing is trying to make sure that you're using big shapes, filling the whole paper in, but making sure that your big shapes are also overlapping. So I wanted to make sure that I had big shapes, and I kept mine fairly simple and pretty geometric. So most of my shapes are circular or rectangular, just to keep the keep it simple. And then also another thing, it takes a lot of patience, but let those layers dry in between so that you build up layers instead of everything blending together and being really flat and not having any dimension. Make sure that you are patient and you let each layer lay on top of the last layer. Those are a couple tips. I love how this turned out. I love the texture. I'm going to take my texture cards and try and come up with some more ways. I'm going to look at this piece and see what I liked, what I didn't like, and come up with some more ideas of things that I could do with texture next time. And I might play with some of the cards, because I actually don't love the designs on these. I was kind of just rubbing paint on them, the extra leftover paint. So I might make them look a little better too. So if you like that, please make sure to let me know by clicking like and subscribing. And if this has been helpful for you and you have friends that are homeschooling or that maybe need a little weekly challenge in the creativity department, please make sure to share. That is how you can give back. So thank you. Have a great day.